Okay, let's talk about these dies before we jump into making the card. So we have our magic picture changer, and it comes with this large die, which is going to create basically a pocket. And the nice thing about this die is you see this open looking square. This is where your image is going to show when the card is given to the gift receiver. So this is the first image. This is your before when it comes to the magic picture changer. And this creates a little pocket for our pull tab piece to slide through. So there's a little opening here. This is going to slide through, and this is the before and this is the after. So again, these squares line up. So your secondary image you want here. You want to stamp it in where this open square is. So just keep that in mind when you're stamping and die cutting with these pieces. The other important part of this is the pull tab. Now this goes on top of our pull tab piece, and it is also what keeps this piece inside our pocket. So there is a stopper here. You could see it won't go any further than those, but when it goes down, you don't want to slide out the bottom, obviously. So we need this pull tab. As you can see, it's a little wider, and this is what stops it from going inside the pocket. So those are the three important pieces of our magic picture changer. Now the die set also comes with this frame, and this helps kind of hide what I call the ugly bits. And that's just these extra little cut lines here that really, you know, are what are making the pieces move, the mechanics of the die. And it will cover, as you can see here, a little bit of the square. So that way just the image you are showing or that you are putting into your magic picture changer will show. So this just helps clean it up and make it look a little prettier. Now, if you want it to look even more pretty, you could buy the add-on. So the add-on comes with 2 die pieces. It comes with this additional pull tab. So if you don't like the arrow and you want to use the word pull, you can use this one. And it comes with a larger frame. And this frame will cover the whole pocket. So this just helps clean it up a little more. Maybe you're stamping and distressing and coloring on your pocket, and this you can add a solid piece of paper or pattern paper and it will cover it completely, or you know, a different color. So I'm going to be using this probably for all 4 of my videos, but it's not necessary. You can totally mask and you know, draw the square so you know where to stamp and mask, and then use the frame to cover if you want to, you know, have 2 different colors for your image or your pocket. But you will see all of that in my videos this month. So let's start with my first card for this month. I've laid out all the dies that I'm going to be using from these 2 sets, as well as this really cute frame die from Ink Road Studios to look like the Friends frame. And I'm going to be using some stamps from the stamp set, one with a friend from Kindred Stamps, and I'm using this purple cardstock from my stash to cut out the largest die and my little frame cover from the add-on set. And I'm going to be running those through my cutting machine to start creating my pocket and to decorate the picture changer. I also cut out a piece of my mixed media paper for the insert of my magic picture changer because I'm going to be stamping an image and coloring it in and distressing. So I'm using the die as a guide of where I'm going to stamp my coffee mug image, and I'm going to be using my Misty to help with that. I'm going to stamp in this VersaFine ink because I'm going to be embossing. So I'm stamping twice to get a nice clear image, and then I am going to bring out my Detail Clear embossing powder and emboss that image. I like to emboss my lines when I'm going to be using my Zig Clean Color brushes because it just helps keep the watercolor in the right spots in my image. But before I do that, I need to stamp a mask. I'm going to be just using a Post-it note to stamp this mug. I'm just using some black ink, and I'm going to cut along the line of the image. I'm going to be distressing this piece, and I want the ink to go right up against my image. I don't want there to be a white kind of border, so I am cutting directly on the inked stamped line, so that way my distress will go up to my image. There's also a little spot on the coffee mug that I'm using my precision blade, retractable blade, to cut out. So I'm laying that over the image, and I'm using my Distress Oxide in Dusty Concord to match as close as I can to that purple paper that is going to be the outside of my magic picture changer. I'm adding a little bit of some sparkle silk just to add some texture to the image. So while I set that aside to dry, I cut out the friend's frame in some yellow cardstock, and there's these little individual kind of swirly lines that pop out, but I wanted to keep them with the die. So I'm just using some clear kind of like Scotch tape on the back of my die cut image to make sure those small pieces stay inside the larger frame. So I'm going to do that all the way around the frame, and then I'm going to take my scoring tool, and I'm going to make sure that that tape is really secure and that those small little pieces from the die will not fall out. So now that that's done, it's time to color in my coffee mug. I'm just using my heat embossing tool to make sure everything is dry before I start applying watercolor. I'm trying to color the mug how it looks on the Central Perk sign on the cafe. Now that doesn't sit in a saucer, it's just a mug by itself, but I wanted to still kind of look like that coffee mug. So I'm just putting in a little bit of color and along the edge of the mug and saucer, and using my watercolor brush pen to bring that color towards the center of the mug. I'm only using 2 colors, one for the mug itself and then a darker brown for the coffee inside. Again, for the coffee, I'm applying ink to the edge and then using my watercolor brush pen to fill in the open space. I'm going to use my heat gun to speed up the drying process because I'm going to use my white gel pen to create kind of steam coming off that mug. If you look at the Central Perk logo, there's these little fun white squiggly lines that look like there's steam coming off of the coffee inside the mug. Now that that's done, I'm pulling out all my die cut pieces, and the frame is slightly larger than the inner square of the add-on frame. So I'm just using a pen to mark about where those lines would be. I didn't really like seeing the frame on the inside, which looking back it doesn't really matter, but it's fine. So I'm trimming the piece to create a larger hole. I'm going to use my paper trimmer just to help make some straight cuts onto that paper. So now the inner part of that frame is bigger and it will fit behind the yellow frame a little better. Now I'm going to take that pull tab die piece and I'm going to make sure that my image is in the square that you will see when I lift up the pull tab, and I'm going to run that through my die cut machine. Now I have all my pieces for my magic picture changer. It's time to assemble. I brought out my 1/8 inch score tape and my embossing tool and my scoring tool, and I remember that I also needed to die cut the pull tab, so I did that real quick in that same yellow paper. And I'm folding over the edge of this pocket and using my scoring tool to make sure I have a nice crease. And then I'm going to be using this embossing tool to add in baby powder everywhere that there's a die cut line on my die cuts. Anywhere there's a cut line, because I want to make sure that these pieces will link into each other. So I slowed this down so you can see each of these little pieces are sliding in and start from the bottom and go to the top. It's just much easier. And I want to make sure that they slide really well. So I'm using this embossing powder just to make sure there's no static, nothing sticky, nothing's going to cling. I want to make sure that that image can really slide up and down easily from my card receiver. Now that that's done, I'm going to apply that Scotch tape to those really tiny scored little flaps and using my scoring tool to make sure that's secure. I'm going to bring that down on one side and then the other. I like to just peel off a little bit of my release tape to make sure everything is centered before fully sealing that little pocket together. Now for the pull tab, I'm going to glue that to the top. I'm just using some wet glue, and I'm going to also use a clear block to help me add some pressure to make sure that that pull tab is secure. I also made sure to save the little P so I can pull out the tiny insert of that P to glue onto my pull tab. Just using my jewel picker to help pick it up and place it onto the pull tab. I'm going to clean up while that is gluing and drying and making sure everything is functioning and it looks great. So now I'm going to apply this frame. You're going to apply the same double-sided sticky tape to the top and bottom and 4 corners, like you can see here. You don't want anything on the side because you don't want to risk anything interfering with the actual mechanism of this Magic Picture Changer pocket. I'm putting that on. There is a tiny slit that lines up perfectly where the pull tab goes, and then I'm going to add my frame. Again, I'm using some score tape all the way around, but I'm making sure not to be too close to the edge, so I don't want to risk interfering with the actual mechanism of this pull tab. So making sure my frame is nice and centered. Probably should have done this first before putting it onto the pocket, but that's okay. And everything is working. So this is actually around their little peephole in the door. So I just grabbed a thin Sharpie and drew that on so that way it would look like the actual door from the friend's apartment. Now I'm going to be working on my sentiment. I die cut another piece of that same purple cardstock out of the largest stitch rectangle die, and I'm stamping just part of the sentiment, the one where, and I'm using that same VersaFine ink, but this time I'm going to be using Kindred Stamps Snow Sparkle Embossing Powder. This is very similar to the holographic embossing powder that I've used in the past from Ranger, and it's just going to add a little slight sparkle to my sentiment. So I'm going to emboss that, and then I will slow it down so you can kind of see that sparkle within the sentiment. You can see it's still black, but there's this little shimmer to it. It just adds a little bit of extra embellishment to the card. I have a white cardstock base on some 110-pound paper, and I'm going to be using my little heavy duty tape runner to adhere to my card base. Now my card base was a little bit larger than my purple paper, so I'm just going to use some large scissors to trim that down. Now that that is done, I'm going to adhere my mechanism to the card, also using that strong adhesive, and I'm centering it to my sentiment and to my card base. Now I'm going to finish the sentiment by saying "you celebrate," so the whole sentiment will be the one where you celebrate, and I'm going to be stamping "you celebrate" in just some black ink. I'm not going to be embossing on the inside of the card, so I'm using my Misty to help here, so if the first time I stamp it's not clear, I can ink it again, but it looks pretty good. Now I wanted to add a little bit more on the inside, and Ink Road Stamps has a friend's stamp set also, and I'm using some yellow ink and this little frame stamp to stamp on the inside. So I stamp, and I totally misstamped that one, so I did my best to stamp over it. Not perfect, but it's not bad. And there is my finished card. So I have "you celebrate" on the inside, and I have the mechanism on the outside. This is a really cute card for a friend's lover, and I'm really excited to give it to the card recipient. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to use the Magic Picture Changer die. I'm looking forward to showing you more ideas this month. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and have a great day.